back, guys, to the Yankees Farm Report. Today, we're going to dig into some of the top prospects at Triple-A and what they've been up to, the roster assignments, roster surprises, and a couple of injuries. As always, I want to thank the channel members and everyone who engages this content with views, likes, follows, and sharing the content as well. Make sure you guys check out the website and check out the forums, which is now active. And getting right into today, we're going to open up with Scranton, who's already had a series over the weekend. Spencer Jones hitting 333, 1052 OPS, 2 extra base hits, a home run, 3 RBIs, 1 walk to 5 strikeouts. Jason Dominguez hitting 308, 3 RBIs, 2 strikeouts. Brendan Beck had a very good game to open the season. 5 shutout innings, no walks, 9 strikeouts. Carlos Lagrange, 4 innings, 1 run, 3 strikeouts, no walk, which is key for him. And Giovanni Cruz, which is another guy that we're keeping a close eye on, as he could be an option for the bullpen at some point this season. Two innings of work, one unearned run, which I believe was a ghost runner. He gave a walk and 3 strikeouts.
You look at that Scranton roster, and especially on the position player side, there's going to be a lot of these guys are going to do what you expect them to do,
Mhm.
right? I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises there. I don't think there's going to be a lot of disappointments there. I think, um, but at this point, we're also in the time of the season where it's like, let's not get too worked up about results because
What do you mean?
playing in Buffalo, Rochester, and I looked at the weather for Scranton next week in 40s and rain. So the fact that some guys are putting some numbers on the board, the fact that Lagrange is almost touching 100 when it's 20 degrees outside. I mean, guys are doing what they do, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I remember, that first start, Legrand, because remember last year he was kind of the surprise promotion
Mhm.
at Hudson Valley. That first start didn't go well for him, and I remember
No.
talking to you, Carlos,
Mhm.
asking about it, and you were saying, it's just he couldn't get a grip of it, and he couldn't really get the feel for the pitches. It's his first
Mhm.
time he was, basically north of Florida. Um,
Mhm. Yep.
so, it was very different circumstances, and he there was some bad luck too, if I remember correctly, but going to this previous start, yeah, the stuff wasn't as extreme as we've seen it. Um, that doesn't mean it wasn't good still, because he pitched Saturday, right?
Yeah.
If I remember
No, he
correctly,
pitched
or
Sunday. He pitched
no,
Sunday. He
Sunday
pitched,
still.
yeah, the
Yeah,
first game of
they
the
had the
doubleheader.
game. Yeah, but yeah. I'm just pulling up his stuff numbers right now, but he still sat his fastball was still, still 98 miles per hour. It was still well above average on the on the stuff plus models. Um, it's nothing to worry about until, we saw him cruising in the spring. I unless he goes like this for, a couple more starts in a row, I don't think there's any reason to be alarmed.
Mhm.
I think we saw it with Cam Schlittler today in a cold Seattle. He was running a couple ticks lower than he was in San Francisco or in his spring start. So it's, you got to start to see a trend before you actually jump on that, other than just, the basic assumption of it's cold. It's hard to keep your muscles loose. And yeah, no, he was, it was a good start dealing with the weather.
Yeah, for me,
Carlos, I
for me.
consider you the original driver of the Lagrange hype train, but for good reason, and I still blame you that I can't afford his Bowman rookie
Oh
card.
my God.
Um, but but were you starting to believe that he could make the big club out of camp, or was that something that you thought, all right, I know this is coming later, and it's nice that he made a name for himself this spring?
You mean coming into camp this season?
No, I mean, as camp started to go, I mean, he was the story.
Oh, yeah, of course. He
Did
was.
you did you
I
start
and
to believe that he might actually make the club out of camp
I
and
did.
put him
I
in the
did.
bullpen?
I did. And I told him that. I told him I was like, the theme of this spring training has been you. I told him that. And yeah, I really thought that he had a good shot to make the bullpen. Of course, he wasn't gonna get a rotation spot because they're it's crowded as it is. But
Mhm.
I thought that Winquest did not make the case to make this team, and that would have given Lagrange an opportunity to slide into the bullpen. But that's not the case. For some reason, the Yankees rolled with Winquest. I know it's
I
early.
I
I
think they
know
like
it's
him.
early.
And
I
they'd have to
know
They
give
it's
him
went they
back.
went
early.
with Winquist. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
pretty
Winquist
much.
is going to be here in a few
Yeah.
days.
I mean, again, I know it's early, but to me, to me, I feel like the Yankees sometimes do this thing where they kind of punt on games, where they're like, where they just throw whatever they can out there and hope for a win, and that should usually come back to bite them at the end of the season, where they're down a game or two games or something like that, or they're trying to fend somebody off. And I don't understand why if Winquist is on the team, why was Blackburn pitching when he was? Again,
Yeah,
I know it's early. It's way too early to start getting worked up over stuff like that, but it's just little things like that
but
that annoy
being
me.
a Rule 5 pick, I think they like him, and they if they don't keep him on the roster, they have to put him on waivers. So I wonder if they're going to try to find a way to keep him. And if it was as simple as sending him down, I think they would have done it already. But
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think the deadline we're looking at is I think for April 11th is when they will finally need a fifth starter. Um, someone's going to be, unless they go with Ryan Yarbrough, someone's coming up. Like most likely, we suspect Luis Heel. And if
Mhm.
that happens, someone's getting optioned, and it's between Paul Blackburn, Ryan Yarborough, and Cade Winquist. So either Cade's going back to St. Louis, or more likely than not, Paul Blackburn is going to get DFA'd. So it's we're going to find out what the direction with the pitching is in a week or so. So that's why I'm kind of not uh too upset about it. They just took Cade or Paul because they needed the extra arm, since they need the starter. I'm not into a position where it's like, why are they holding on to this guy if they're not using him yet?
Yeah, it's
But I
so
am.
early.
But I
I
am.
mean,
And I,
yeah.
I think it's, I know LeGrand killed it this spring. I think is the best thing for him. I think keeping him as a starter, letting him continue to build. I've talked about wanting him in the bullpen, and I still would love to see that, but that's more when we get to the end of the summer, and there's, we start getting to that playoff push. I think right now letting him continue to start is best, and he's going to find his way onto this roster sooner rather than later if he keeps performing, which, that's the bottom line.
If
And
I'm
the
being
things
comp-
being said about him in spring training that opened my eyes are them talking about his mentality and the idea that he thinks like an ace and he works like an ace. And this is a guy who carries himself like a starter and a front of the rotation starter. That's some stuff I didn't hear about him last year, the year before. So the fact that he's got that intangible side, that's a big deal. And hearing Aaron Boone say it wasn't going to be a tough decision coming into camp, but he made it a tough decision, that's a big deal too. So he's very much in the mix. And I agree that his time's coming. It's just not right now.
yeah, no, I'm definitely in agreement with that. And if I'm being completely honest, I think he has a shot to debut this season. But if I'm being realistic, if he's in the rotation this season, that means something has gone horribly wrong, right?
Yep.
His avenue has to be through the bullpen at this point
Well,
because
here,
that's where
what
he
about
fits.
how about this question? Do you think Elmer's ahead of him?
I think this season probably tells us a lot more of that because I've always felt that I felt like Lagrange probably has the higher ceiling, but I felt like Elmer's more polished.
Hmm.
I do too.
I definitely, we kind of talked about putting LeGrand in the bullpen. I think you can do that with LeGrand because he has, two, three legitimate plus double plus weapons. I love Elmer. I still can't remember if I do, but for the longest time I had Elmer ranked above. I still have him ranked above Legrand, but the one thing is Elmer is truly a starter. And it's because of his repertoire and the size of it and his ability to mix and match, like kind of like Max Fried. That's something I just don't think goes well with the bullpen. You don't need a guy in the pen who can throw six different pitches. So I think just, as we get to the, a potential needing a high leverage weapon in the bullpen, and if you want to give a guy a chance, I don't see Elmer fitting that role. I think Elmer's lane is truly as a starter, whereas LeGrand Hayes could be mended to the bullpen, if the opportunity does come. That's just kind of how I interpret the difference between those two.
Agreed.
A
Um,
guy I would love to talk about real quickly, sorry, before we move on to the next subjects, but Giovanni Cruz.
mhm.
That's a guy who got a lot of love during spring training, especially at the last couple weeks of it. And his, appearance on Sunday was, it's more of the same. I mean, you have a guy who throws 100 miles per hour fastball. His slider is 88 with some great movement. What impressed me most in that outing, he threw 2 innings, just one hit, one walk, is four-seam fastball. I only threw 8 of them, but it was in the zone 62.5% of the time. For a reliever who throws like that much heat, the key to him is if he's throwing that in the zone, that's going to get a lot, make people, swing at that slider when it's out of the zone. He has those two pitches, and he also has a splitter that's improving. That could be good against lefties. He that might be a real breakout. I can't remember how they acquired him, but he's really an arm to watch.
I think it was just a free agent signing. I briefly looked over his numbers throughout his career, and they looked pretty good. I think he had last season was probably the blip for him, where the numbers didn't look as good as they were in previous seasons. From what I've seen in spring training and what I've seen, in this one outing, I mean, it's intriguing. I don't know. I forgot where he was before. I know he was with Portland. I forgot who the affiliate
He was
is.
with Boston before the year before that, San Diego, and then he came up with Chicago, the Cubs.
Mm.
That's been his path, yeah.
Yeah, but definitely a guy that I'm keeping an eye on.
Should we throw the name Brennan back out there too, now that he's 2 starts in?
Go
Uh,
for it.
Really, really good first start from him. And it looked like a little stuff uptick even,
Hmm.
especially with the non-fastball category. That fastball is still my concern with him.
Hmm.
Um, you I you could very easily convince me though that if you needed someone to come up and make a major league start, he would come up and hold his own. But I would
I
compare him
was
to somebody who's like a guy who comes off the bench and he plays really well in short stints, and then you start thinking maybe he should start. And then and the more he plays, the more he gets exposed. I worry about that being back because that fastball still seems short. There's a lot of moxie there. There's angle, there's good breaking ball, there's good location. So I can definitely see him being a competitive major league pitcher. I just am not convinced it's a clear rotation spot for him kind of guy.
We talking more like a spot starter.
honestly, as I've done like more studying and starting to understand pitching metrics, I don't think his four seam is actually as bad as, it's kind of led to believe. The velocity, no doubt about it, isn't good. Especially, today it was sitting, just above 91, and it kind of, faded a little bit as his outing went on. But he gets really good vertical break on it. 20 inches today. I think it was a little over 19 on his first start. That's helping the ball ride. That's a great metric, despite the lack of velocity. He has a pretty, it's not too steep of a fastball, so it's not the easiest to read. So there are elements around it that make it help it play up as more average. As I've been studying these stats, and it's when he leaves it definitely in the middle of the zone. Obviously it's not going to play well, but when he's keeping that at the top of the zone, it's really helping him. So yeah, I think it's, I fully agree. If you had needed someone to give you a few starts, by all means, but it's good to see him off to a solid start. We'll have to see how the season goes. Obviously, I prefer Elmer to get the first swing at things, but if he can keep having a good year, that's just another solid weapon to have in the bullpen, or just having the potential rotation.
And it's weird because they didn't protect him, and he goes undrafted in the Rule 5. He's not on their 40. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
the league sending a message and the Yankees are sending a message that, I mean, starting pitching depth is really valuable, but
Yeah.
this guy was available to everybody and nobody took him. Um,
And I understand wanting upside, but and because we all know that a player who can produce, give you a 5 WAR season is more valuable than a guy who'll give you maybe 2 to 3 WAR seasons. But you look at a guy, TJ Rumfield, his whole thing was, yeah, he makes a lot of contact, but doesn't provide much power. He's off to a really hot start in Colorado, and my whole thing is thinking think there are not a lot of teams. There's a lot of first basemen. He's not an upper echelon first baseman, but I obviously Colorado got him. I think about, as a Nationals fan, our first baseman this year is a platoon between, well, right now, because they just got Curtis Mead, but also Luis Garcia, the former second baseman, who's so bad defensively they had to move to the first, where he hasn't looked much better. And I'm just thinking, I would have loved to have TJ Rumfield here. I think he's going to be a very solid contributor, and be a good MLB player. I don't know how good Brendan Beck will be, but we've seen guys like Jansen Junk has made a role in Miami without elite stuff. And yeah, it's, people get so, even myself included, get so enamored with upside that sometimes we kind of overlook, I can do the job.
Yeah, I'm glad they still have him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start with the Somerset roster. Um, Somerset, it looks like they're going to be a fun team to watch. Kyle Carr's back there again. Who else? Xavier Rivas, I think, and Kate Smith for me were the biggest surprises on this roster. What did you guys think?
I thought Cade Smith would be there, especially after the fall league. I hoped Rivas would be there, and I'm glad to see that. I mean, that says something to me. And again, it could be a matter of just spreading out the starters. Um, but I think he's deserving. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there.
Let me just say real quick regarding Kate Smith, I'm not surprised that he got the bump or that he's there because I think he's been a very good pitcher for his short career. My thing with him was that I don't remember how many innings of work he got last season due to
Oh, you're right.
injuries. So that's why I thought that they would have him repeat at Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
I didn't think that they were just
I
going to throw him
mean,
to Somerset, but the Yankees have been a bit aggressive.
listen, we just talked about a guy who they were aggressive, having not thrown many innings, like Carlos Legrand. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
I think he was at 20 innings at
I,
Tampa.
I totally get your thoughts. Yeah, no, he threw 30, yeah, last year he threw 39.2 innings across, I guess he threw 4 innings in complex, 2.2 in low A, and then 32 in high A. Then he probably threw like another 10 in AFL.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and he was
you
a rock
know,
star in the AFL.
I think when we talk about Kate Smith and Xavier Rivas, and obviously, when I say all this, please just be aware that Rivas has the better stuff. Um, but they're both guys who it's their off-speed breaking stuff that's their real weapons. Kate Smith mainly with his slider, and Xavier Rivas with his changeup, or as he called it when we talked to him, his splitter. Um, those are the two, that's their how those two are going to make their money, but they kind of lack fastball velocity is what we've seen from them. Especially more with Rivas. I'm very curious if these aggressive promotions are because maybe they found a tick or two.
Hmm.
That's kind of my hope. Obviously, we've seen guys find some velocity. I'm not going to compare anyone to Cam Schlittler because he's kind of a, he's a unicorn going for
Definitely.
99, even like 92 to 99 at the end of last year. That was crazy. But, Andrew Landry was starting to get up to 98 last year.
Hmm.
Um, they've done good job of helping benefit fastball traits, whether it's, turning into a sinker. Um, so yeah, that's just where I'm curious with it is the Yankees aren't shy about showing who they like and being aggressive with guys. They did it with Rivas when his numbers weren't great in low A, went to high A, dominated. So it's not shocking that they're making this move with him. But I'm just curious about, did stuff happen in the offseason that we don't know about yet?
Hmm. Yeah, because when
Because
we
I kind
spoke
of
to him,
believe there is.
yeah, when we spoke to him, he spoke about that, right? About hoping to add a tick, two, maybe even three to the fastball, and I think it would completely take him to the next level if he was able to do that. But like you said, he has great stuff, but if he can get a little bit more, add a few more ticks to that fastball, it completely changes him.
So it's those two guys. It's Kyle Carr. It's Ben Hess. You think they're a five-man rotation or six-man rotation in Somerset?
They've been a six-man rotation from what I recall. I know Bailey Dees is back there again after spending the last year at Triple-A. Um,
Trent Sellers is there too.
Oh, he
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, from my look at it, I see, obviously it's been announced Ben Hess is starting opening day, which is well
Hmm.
deserved. Um, then you have Kyle Carr, Cade Smith, Xavier Rivas. So then it comes if you're doing a five-man rotation, Trent Sellers has been a good, reliable innings eater. Bailey Dees has, he was a starter at 24, but I think he's truly better as a reliever. And then potentially Hayden Murta, who's kind of done some fluctuating between. But I honestly read it as more of a five-man rotation. I think Sellers probably ends up getting that gig since he's consistently started. And I kind of prefer at Somerset level to start doing a five-man rotation because I think it's better to help start these guys building up pitch counts and building up innings. Obviously Ben Hess did miss some time with injury, but you kind of look back at last year, he was kind of having shorter starts most of the season, especially in Hudson Valley. He was, barely going five, it felt like, and definitely nothing more. Um, so I think, five-man rotation is probably what I would wager happens.
So Bryce Cunningham is throwing, from what we can tell. Where does he go if and when he's ready? Is he a double-A pitcher or are we moving some chairs to Hudson
I'm thinking he's
Valley?
back at Hudson Valley.
Okay. Because that's kind of a story, I think, just like at the big league club where you've got some starters who are working their way back. You get
Yeah,
some guys who I think are on the cusp here in the minors of being ready to go.
I'm looking at the live BP schedule, and this will just tell you like where some of these guys are, right? Um, Kurtner had 20 pitches for today.
Who did?
Cheney, Kurtner,
Oh, Kirtner.
Cheney,
Okay,
Cheney had 78. Luis Serna 79. Is this JT Etheridge?
probably.
No, 50 pitches. Stupridge 20, Breedlove 20, Warrecker 15, Alejandro 20, Alcantara 66, Gonzalez 74, and Solomon 20. I wasn't aware Solomon was hurt.
Gonzalez, Omar Gonzalez.
Yeah,
Okay, it's a big pitch count. I'm guessing he's starting the FCL.
yeah. I thought he was going to be at Tampa.
Yeah, no, I
And
I would like to see Bryce at Somerset. I know that he wasn't great when he came back from that injury. Do we know what the injury is, or?
I don't know what the injury was, but I was going to mention the AFL numbers did not look good either. The Commanders,
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, again, sorry to keep bringing it back to him, but Legrand when he was there was having command issues, so I
He
don't
was.
take
Mhm.
that as the dedicator, but I that's not the right word. But I think it's similar situation where we're gonna know a lot about how they feel about him, where they place him.
Where I thought he might
Um,
have been injured and he was just pushing himself.
yeah, it was definitely just kind of a weird situation how everything played out. I feel like they wouldn't have sent him there if they didn't think he was healthy, but he just did not look the same once he returned. So that's definitely thank you for bringing that up, Marcus, because I think it's a great story. I don't want to say storyline, but it's something to watch for when he does get back to being able to pitch in these games.
Just real quick, something that Greg Johnson from the Trentonian posted or tweeted that Ben Hess has been working on a cutter, and Kyle Carr did put on about 10 pounds of muscle, and he's now throwing a curveball.
He
So
looked
he's got
like
a
he made
six
a little
pitch repertoire.
mechanical tweak
So
too
he's got a
from
six
watching
pitch
him.
repertoire now.
Yeah. He looked like he mechanically he looked a little different this spring. And he got the start in the breakout game, which
Mm.
grain of salt, I understand. But that's a that's a little nod in his direction.
Yeah, I just want to start on Ben Hess because I find it interesting. 'Cause, we have 73 pitches of data from his spring starts, and he didn't debut a cutter. At least it wasn't tagged anywhere. Um, but he's right now four seam sweeper, curveball, changeup. The curveball looks great as it's the best curve in the organization. I would say it's a top five, six pitch in the organization, minor league organization to be clear. Um, but I think, even though his four seam has good traits, it's not high velocity. So I think adding that cutter would sit really nice. And also it kind of creates, a little bit of deviation where the four seam, cutter, sweeper. If my hand directions there weren't good, but I kind of like that ad for him. And kind of helping himself against, righties with stuff away. Um, yeah, no, it's definitely something that I'm curious to see what happens with.
Moving on to the Hudson Valley Renegades. For me, the biggest surprises were Frania Herrera, Luis Serna due to lack of innings, Wilson Rodriguez, same thing due to lack of availability, and I thought they were a little aggressive with Kyle West.
Yeah, I'm really happy about the Wilson Rodriguez thing. I'm a believer there. That's a good looking athlete. I think he's going to put some things together this year. That's a guy I got my eyes on him. I'm happy to see him there.
He had some good data from his time in Tampa. If I remember correctly, he got hurt like kind of towards the end of the season there. Um, but
Hmm.
he has some, solid exit velocities, but he doesn't do anything great from it, but some pretty good ability to get the bat in the ball and make contact, pretty good ability to pull the ball in the air, pretty good ability to not chase. What does that make him? I'm not sure, right? But it's definitely shaping up as someone who can at least be a utility player if he keeps, going at that pace. But hopefully we do kind of see a breakout somewhere for him that makes you think, oh, there's more than utility upside here.
I'm
But yeah, no,
looking.
good for him.
I'm looking at and I'm happy to see Roderick Arias has come up here. He definitely needed to change the scenery. Hopefully things change with him. Um, I'm looking at the pitching staff and I'm seeing Brandon Decker, Rory Fox, Franya Herrera, Pico Khan, Andrew Landry, and Sean Paul Lennon
Lit
and
on.
Luis Serna. And I'm Luis Serna. That's seven starters.
What about Ben Grable?
And
Is he
Ben Grable would make
Who
eight.
knows? Yeah, who knows where he'll be put? Baron Stewart started plenty for them,
He did.
last year. I don't think he even said Jack Siebert,
Yeah,
who
right.
threw
Who's
Yes.
definitely
who
going to be
threw
in the
four,
rotation.
who threw 4 innings at the spring breakout.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of this was a big part of the article I posted on the website yesterday. Or was that 2 days ago now? But yeah, or it was yesterday, Monday, or no, today's Wednesday. I'm losing my mind here. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of
Which blew up,
options.
by the way. So if you haven't checked it out, go ahead and check it out.
But yeah, in that article, looking at the Hudson Valley roster, there's a lot of starting pitching options in
Yep.
Hudson Valley. And it feels pretty safe. You said it, Marcus. Jack Seaver definitely going to be a starter. Be shocked if he isn't. Rory Fox and Pico Cone, they're not they're first two pitchers in the 2025 draft. I don't think they're putting them in the Hudson Valley and skipping low A to be relievers. Um, and then, yeah, there's just a bunch of guys who have started in the past but have had limitations in their innings. It's already been announced that Pico Cone is the game one starter on Friday, but then surprisingly, it's Jean-Paul Linan
Hmm.
and Franier Herrera, who threw 10 innings in Tampa last year and is already getting the bump. Um, threw 10 innings in Tampa and only had one start on all last season between Tampa and FCL, and he's already getting a chance to start. The
Yeah, he's
way
20
that
years
reads,
old.
yeah, going to be 21 in May. Yeah. The way that reads to me though is I wouldn't be surprised if to get all these guys starting is like we see 3 innings from Herrera, then 3 innings from
Hmm.
Serna, and they kind of do some piggybacking to let these guys stay a little bit stretched out while also kind of protecting them. That's where I think I see this going right now.
That makes the most sense, I think. And it's funny because you look at all these names, and depending on who you read, an outside evaluator has slapped reliever tag on just about all these guys for eventually. which is the easiest thing to do. It's easy to bet reliever or bet non-prospect on guys. You're going to be right most of the time. But as we've seen the Yankees do, we're going to develop you as a starter and see what happens. And it's been working out. So all these guys who've had the reliever tag slapped on them, I'm really curious to see what they come out throwing as starters.
I mean, I look at this pitching staff and I see two guys that I think are like could be legit uh back of the bullpen weapon kind of guys, right? That's Chris Veach, who had a very good season at Tampa last season, and then I'm really big on Tony Rossi. Have you guys gotten a chance to look at Rossi?
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks to you. You got me looking at Tony Rossi. I don't think I was paying enough attention to him, and
hmm
then you drew my eyes his way.
Yeah, he's definitely, they're both older guys, but they both looked really good. Honestly, I was really hoping we'd get them at a higher level to start this year, but you'll take what you can get.
hmm
I wouldn't expect them to stay down there too long. But yeah, I mean, God, Rossi, I mean, he only threw 82 pitches in low A, so that's all the data we have. But sinker at 95 with 14 inches of horizontal break. Um, it's in the zone 67% of the time. Obviously, this was in low A, and he performed. I don't want to say I say worse, lovingly because he didn't allow a run
Yeah,
in
at
his seven
Tampa.
innings in low A, so
Yeah.
relatively worse. It's some nasty stuff. Obviously he's more advanced as a 26-year-old. I don't really care about age too much when it comes to someone who profiles a reliever. He can make it at 29. Our Fernando Cruz didn't really make it in the big leagues until he was older, and
And Greg
he's
Weiser, wasn't he another one?
nasty.
Weiser?
Weiser, yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely was pretty old. So
He was like
no,
28.
they're yeah, two guys worth watching, and you just never know who's going to pop up. We mentioned Ben Grable. I don't know if he's going to be in the bullpen or in the rotation. Um, but an 11th round pick, that's put. Who knows what they're going to get out of this guy? We haven't seen him yet, and they'll always have someone random pop off. Andrew Landry is the someone random who popped off, and as an 18th rounder who I didn't really consider anything more than a non-prospect, and now he's a top 30 prospect in the organization. So. Yeah, it'll be fun to watch.
I
What,
think you're right about the piggybacking thing. I think there's going to be a lot of that. And
what's your
Which is
starting
good for us.
what's your starting infield on this team?
I was going to ask the same question. So I think it's Roderick at third. I
hmm
think it's Jackson at short. I think it's
hmm
Kent at second. And man, I feel bad for Josh Moylan because I think he can play. And
hmm
you don't want to be the career games played leader for a minor league organization, but he's got the career lead for the Hudson Valley Renegades, over 200 games, I think. I think he can play. I'd like to see him get to Double-A at some point, but I'd put him at first because he can play first. And it was West the DH, which
Connor McGinnis was what, the 10th round pick? I think he was a
was a
10th
little
round pick.
Kyle
earlier than
West
that.
was, I think,
It was
13th. I
close. It
think it
was
was
No,
13th.
no,
close.
no. Connor McGinnis.
Yeah, it's
I think Connor
close.
McGinnis was 10th round. Yeah.
He was 10. Okay.
I feel like I know they only listed him as an infielder, but I feel like Josh Moylan can like moonlight in the outfield in a
I think
corner
you're right.
spot.
I think you're right.
Um, when I look at this, first of all, we've talked about plenty this winter how obviously position player prospect pools very weekend just because of all the trades, which makes sense. That being said, this is probably the most talented position player group on any of these minor league teams. Maybe you can say Triple-A Scranton because they have Jason and Spencer Jones and Yankiel is still young, and then obviously a lot of good vets. But I'm not going to consider a team that had guys like Paul DeYoung and Ernesto. I'm not considering that as strongly.
hmm
The way I see it, I think there's going to be a lot of moving around. I think Kyle West is probably going to be your primary first baseman. I agree with you. Josh Moylan has served well. He's had two above average seasons in Hudson Valley in terms of WRC plus with 117 and 112. But it's they're telling you what they think. Kyle West, you know, barely played any in Tampa, and he's already in Hudson Valley. I think they probably see him as the more prospect pedigree guy right now. So I expect him to get more looks at first. But the infield, I expect a lot of rotation. I think Caden and Core are the good two guys who are going to be in there just about every day. But, you know, even despite his struggles and his loss of status, I would think that Roderick Arias is going to be um, getting more playing time over Connor McGinnis and Duncan Pastore. So,
We haven't mentioned the
um,
name of Eric Genther. Talk about the buzz starting for a guy. I mean, that's a name that's coming out of the organization. That's coming out of the BA article about the guys who are drawing scouts' attention on the backfields. That name came up. So there's somebody there. This could be the next free agent signing that the Yankees turn into a prospect here.
yeah,
Um,
we talk about Kilby so much in his 18 games and Genther 17 games in low A. Obviously, 23-year-old versus an 18-year-old, different conversation, but W 155 WRC plus 17.2 walk percent to 12.1 walk percent. Good numbers for a short stint. Yeah, we need the catching depth. He could be the new Rafael Flores.
Yeah, and it's kind of like if you're talking about the national publications that cover prospects, they're going to give more attention to guys who are known before the draft or who were drafted because they were covered so much ahead of time. And Genther wasn't drafted. So there's somebody who's going to have to earn his way into the conversation. And the fact that I've heard his name so much this spring makes me think that we've really got something here.
Yeah, I mean the small sample StatCast data looks great. Chased only 15% of the time, whipped only 9.8% of the time, which is 100th percentile, 93.7% zone contact, 91% pull air rate. For a guy who doesn't have top prospect pedigree, these are things I like to see that, at least raise his floor and make him a guy where he could become something. And it's not a guy who I think is just like a minor league or depth piece. There's actually some buzz here.
And I think and running him out behind the plate is really interesting. And I think that's who pushed Urena back to Tampa.
I was just gonna say that.
Did he play catcher in college? Because
He's an
he's listed as
outfielder.
an
No, an
yeah,
outfielder.
that's the interesting thing. And
Yes.
maybe this is
And
a
I
JC
looked.
Escarra thing
They
I
said
because
he
looked at
he,
caught
that.
before, but was not a catcher in
I looked
college
at that
primarily.
before because people kept mentioning him as catcher, and I was like, "Why catcher?" All I've seen him play is the outfield, and I'm looking at his numbers. I don't think he's played outfield since like 2022, if I'm not mistaken. You guys in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but he hasn't really
interesting.
played catcher in like 2+ years.
Which
Yeah,
once
that's
again,
interesting.
I feel good about the Yankees developing pitchers, and I feel good about them developing catchers.
Hey,
So
they found the bat. They need some place to plug him in.
yeah,
Yeah, also
Um,
just I just want to mention his name real quickly, because he wasn't on a roster. Tomas Frick. I think he's, you know, uh, I really like him and I think he's a guy who could
he showed
potentially be a
flashes.
backup. Wasn't on any of the rosters, so I
yeah.
hope he's well, hope he's back soon. Hope it's nothing serious.
Same.
But
That was a surprise.
it's yeah, but it has to. I imagine it has to be an injury because for a team that's as much as I'd love to talk about the catching depth, it's pretty damn depleted right now. So that's seeing him not in a roster was a little eye-raising to me. Um, yeah, so hopefully he gets well soon.
Moving on to the Tarpons, single A, also sometimes referred to as low A. For me, the biggest surprise was we're seeing Alan Facundo still here. I think he threw 30 innings, if I'm not mistaken, last season, and he looked good. Left-hander who could reach triple digits. And he's been there before. Just unfortunate injuries have cut his season short. Henry Delane coming back here again. Um, a little surprising to see Hans Montero, who had one of the best seasons for the Tarpons back there. We already mentioned Ray Arena and Emmanuel Tejada back here again, but I get it. He hasn't been on the field that often. What I'm seeing is, or what I believe that he's back at Tampa is just that this is where they're going to be able to get him at bats. They would have sent him to Hudson Valley, he would have been, the at bats would have been as plentiful for him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and
Yeah, I think the hope is a guy like Caden Kent or Core Jackson will make the case for Double-A. So we didn't really talk about the Double-A position players, but the infield is George Lombard, Kobe Morales, then Marco Luciano, Tyler Hardman, Owen Cobb. There's room for if they're not going to be afraid to push like an Owen Cobb to the side. No offense, Owen, if you listen to this, for a Caden or Core if they make their case, and that could then open up the room for Emmanuel Tejada, who I think it's well known as a guy I really love and think he could be something. I'm not pressed about him starting at this level, especially given the recovery from ACL. Um, but yeah, you're right. It is like some of these cases, it's like you could make the case Hudson Valley, but you see why they started him in Tampa, especially on the pitching side, because we just talked about how absolutely stacked Hudson Valley is. Um, so yeah, no, it's definitely a good looking group. There's some interesting pieces on both sides. Um, hopefully Grayson Carter can find the strike zone now.
You're terrible. You're terrible. You're terrible. So who was your
it,
rotation? What's your rotation?
well, I wouldn't have. I was questioning whether Facundo was going to start this year or go to the bullpen and maybe get fast tracked that way. But him being in Tampa makes me think he's starting, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
Um,
he's one of those pitchers that you have to give him every opportunity to start.
yeah.
I agree. And I just, I feel like I should mention though, because we talked about the pleasant surprise of Franier Rivera and Xavier Rivas, and also
Mhm.
Luis Fern is a guy I want to mention that. Like that tells me a lot of that the Yankees think of him. It is a little concerning that Facundo is starting in low A, given that he's older than both of them. And he pitched the same amount in low A last year as Serna did, and more than Herrera did. So it's a little concerning because he does have great stuff. I know he's controls an
Mhm.
issue, but um,
He's locked in
hopefully,
when he's locked in.
yeah. I mean, he's going to be starting. I would be super shocked if he isn't. But I just wanted to say that if we want to talk about trying getting to inside the mind of the Yankees, that's something right there that he's starting in low A.
So again, who's your rotation for Tampa to start the season?
I would say so. Facundo, Henry Lalane, Blake Gillespie, the ninth rounder from UC Charlotte or UNC Charlotte will be. I think those three. And then I think if you're four, you know,
Rodriguez.
maybe I would say Jose M. Rodriguez, and then you kind of start getting to some options. I don't know if your darling Martin Mendoza is going to go back to the rotation. I think Danny
Got
Flat's a guy
reliever
who
stuff.
kind of, yeah, Danny Flat's a guy who can kind of do that. Tyler Boudreau, who is a UDFA signing, he's a guy who actually has some legit, kind of like in that Eric Genther where this guy is more than just a UDFA. TJ Stats, he's mentioned him several times as a guy he really likes as an
We
underrated
saw him a
guy.
couple of times at Tampa. He
Yeah,
looked
yeah,
good.
he pitched a little bit. Yeah, so I
Hmm.
don't know if I don't know if there actually is a legit make this guy a starter argument, but that's, could, just someone I would mention.
What about Matthew Tippy?
Is That's my question. Is he a reliever or no?
I just kind of genuinely think like, it's tough. I could see them more. I mean, it should be mentioned he was a reliever at Texas State. I kind of generally would think he'll stay a reliever, but yeah, you never know with the Yankees.
And then you've got the not on the roster Thatcher Hurd, Mac Hewer, who we don't know why he's not on the roster.
Yeah, I got a bunch of
But
guys that I'll bring him up towards the end.
Thatcher Hurd seems like he's getting close.
So
Um,
Yeah,
so would you think that they push Grayson Carter back to the bullpen instead of
I think
keeping
at
him in
this
the
point,
rotation?
I do. I
yeah,
think so.
I think it failed last year. No offense to Grayson, but it's just, having to go to FCL and then getting shut down. It's just, it doesn't show that the Yankees are confident in that anymore. And you know what? I'm fine with that. If he can make it work out of the bullpen,
Mhm.
all it still works
Yeah,
for
there's no
me.
shame in that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Marte's somebody who comes into the rotation, you think? Maybe, possibly, when he's ready? Xavier Marte?
I would say
I, I
I would say yes.
I would at least think they'll give him, shorter like 2, 3 inning outings.
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, Wyatt Parliament's another guy, the seventh rounder coming back from Tommy John. I saw plenty of him watching Virginia Tech baseball. You know, he's definitely got some good stuff also. Um, yeah, I think it should be mentioned also Greg Johnson that you previously mentioned for Somerset. He was told that Chase Hampton, will make his debut there when he's ready.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of talking about that rotation earlier. Things may change at the point he comes
Mm-hmm.
back. I don't know when that'll be, but if Trent Sellers is going to be that fifth man in the rotation, maybe that turns into Hampton's spot when he gets there. But I'm probably expecting, similar timeline to Garrett Cole, probably a little bit behind because Garrett Cole's superhuman. So I'm guessing June we'll probably see him and Hurd. Um, but yeah, no, Hurd, I don't even know where Hurd's gonna start. They might put him in Hudson Valley also.
Um, who would be your starting catcher on this team?
I was wondering if Urena's going to play any first base. Otherwise, I would say him.
I'm imagining that Hans Montero is going to be playing first base for them because he
Yeah,
did
I think
close
you're
out the
right.
season by playing first base. And if I'm looking at the roster, I'm like, they don't really have a true first baseman.
That's what I was thinking.
But I mean, you have to try to get Ureña's bat into the lineup somehow
Yeah.
because we see the damage that he did at the FCO. Granted, it didn't play out that way last season, but it does have a lot of power potential.
Yeah, I would bet on him getting the bulk of the time behind the plate.
Eddie
I would like to see.
Rivera is a
I was gonna say, I'd
guy.
like to see Eddie Rivera get some time there. Only 28 years old. I know he struggled in his 18 games there last year, but I would I am not bullish on Urena behind the plate. I think they'll definitely catch him there still. Don't get me wrong on that, but I think they'll find days to get him at DH or even at first base um, to get Rivera behind the plate. I'll be honest, I really do not know much about Greg, but I don't want to call it. I don't know if it's Bozo. I hope it's
Bazo.
Bozo.
Yeah.
I hope it's Bozo.
Yes,
Let
I
me,
asked about that early on.
but I mean, even his stats at Northeastern aren't very encouraging. So I would expect Rivera um
We're gonna have to
and
eat the bulk of it.
Urena to get most of the starting catching minute time. But no, I hope they start leaning more towards Rivera just because I think there's more defensive upside there.
And I am very happy to see my boy Brandon Maia on this roster. I am expecting him to be the breakout player in the system this year.
So let's say you're right, and Dax Kilby comes back, and Aaron's guy, and kind of my guy too, and Manuel Tejeda. These guys start popping. This all of a sudden becomes, I think, the most interesting group of players to watch.
Yeah, I think it'll be probably I think it'll kind of remind me when Volpe and Wells were there.
Just
Yeah.
because you got this lull here, I think, in the lower end of the system through trades and through maybe
Hmm.
you don't have guys who are developing at the rate that you wanted to see them, that there seems to be this
Yeah,
gap.
there's a lot of wait and see.
Yeah. So it's I think we really want these things to happen.
Hmm.
But these are not things that are necessarily unlikely to happen. So it can become a very interesting group very quickly.
I think we should also give some respect to Bryce Martin Grudzielanek,
Yeah.
20th
GMG.
round pick of last year, but he had a pretty solid cameo after the draft, and I think he's um, I can't remember the Twitter account, Smith Brinkner,
Hmm.
who's a good follow for Yankees stuff. He's high on him, and I think there's reason that he could be a guy who surprises us in kind of a Marshall Toolish sense. Um,
They
so
ran him
yeah,
out there a bunch in spring training with
yeah,
the big league club.
yeah. We know that this they like to flex guys out. I expect Bryce to get most shortstop minutes until Kilby returns, but after that, I think they'll kind of experiment between both of them playing second and short.
I think
But yeah,
Bryce
no,
played
he's like
mostly
an
third base
interesting
for
guy.
Tampa. For Tampa, I think he played mostly third base.
And maybe was Tejeda playing short at all? I don't remember what was going
Well, remember,
on, but
Tejada was mostly injured. I don't.
I get, yeah, but
They
well,
might
they
have been
were
flop. They might have
playing
been
at the
flipping
same
them.
time.
Yeah, they might have been
But,
flipping them.
either way, they like to test that flexibility, so it'll be fun to see. And also just, JoJo Jackson, he was a 17th rounder in 2024. Was basically hurt all of last year, but not to get too excited about a guy who is, 23 years old in low A, but yes, there's some interesting stuff with him, and it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be fun to follow him as someone else in that outfield besides Maea. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting group where, I think when we talk about this system, we all acknowledge it lacks depth.
Mhm.
But with that, it's at least tantalizing because you can easily see some of these guys who can come in and fill that depth and raise the stock of the system again. I like I said, Tejeda can easily kind of become the Dylan Lewis of the group, or a Wilson Rodriguez can become like a Brendan Jones and really help bring this system back. So yeah, it's going to be a fun roster in Tampa and Hudson Valley, especially in my mind.
And it wouldn't have to go back very far to think you're grasping at straws, but the way they've drafted, the way they've signed free agents, the way they've developed, guys who I'll admit, go back 3, 4 years, if someone was an 18th or 19th rounder coming out of college, I'm not paying attention to them. I'm not thinking we have a prospect here. You can't discount anybody now. In a 20 round draft, the way these guys have been performing the last couple of years, I'm talking about their domestic scouts and the way the development teams work. You have to take everybody seriously. And I think that is an awesome place for the system to be in. Whether or not they're brimming with top 100 prospects, that's a different story. But everybody's interesting, and that's a fun follow for people.
We didn't even mention 16th rounder Jackson Lovich, who's
Yeah.
I guess hurt
Right.
right now, but he had maybe the most impressive 6 games stretch out of anyone in the minor leagues last year.
I
Maybe
can't
outside
recall
of Spencer
anyone
Jones.
generating more conversation out of 6 games than that guy did.
But yeah, it's just another guy who, we're obviously we'll have to wait a little longer to see. But as a late round draft pick, your eyes are already raised, and a 12th and 13th rounder, the reason we have Ryan Weathers looking nasty for the big club. Um, so yeah, they've really the last. I really want to go back and like do an analysis article on past draft classes. So that 2024 class has the potential to be really something. But yeah, the last two, classes of the last 20 picks of the last two drafts, it's- there's some real stuff there for guys who are just kind of senior signs or unimportant part of collegiate teams.
Right. And I mean the guy who's hitting cleanup for the New York Yankees right now, the catcher out of the Ivy League, 12th round draft pick. I mean, Cam Schlittler, who all of a sudden comes out, he becomes the next Garrett Cole. I mean, you can't discount anybody, and that's an
Will
awesome
Warren,
thing.
Will
Will Warren was
Warren,
the eighth
Right.
eighth
rounder.
rounder. You got a 7th rounder, an 8th rounder, and a 12th rounder all starting for the New York Yankees.
Yeah. And like
Someone,
somebody
For a team
said
that can't
today, the
develop.
guy who sat 100 miles an hour was a $10,000 sign.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive stuff, and it's why even with all the traits and acknowledging the system is definitely, in the bottom half and even that bottom third of the league, why I still am just looking at like this could be a top 15 farm system come June. Especially if, I know different places weigh things differently, but I think the most routine base way of prospect ratings you'll get is the guys who are 1 to 10. Obviously, if you have one guy there, you're one guy there versus like two guys in the back 50. That one guy's more valuable than those two guys in the back 50. We have a chance of having three guys in the top 50 if Lombard can take that next step offensively, Kilby continues to do what he's doing, and I think LeGrand Hay, just from this spring, But I have a feeling whenever I don't know when Baseball America is going to update. They usually do monthly updates when the season starts. I don't know if they're going to do one based off spring, but if they do, I expect Hay to be a lot higher than I think he was like high 70s, low 80s.
Yeah, I think it was like 78.
I think he's going to be maybe the biggest jumper on the list when they do make it. And that's going to raise the ranking of the system. And then, like we talked about, I think a guy like Emmanuel Tejeda or Jackson Lovich or Maea finally breaking out. That's another way that's going to raise the system, getting that depth back. So yeah, like it's tantalizing despite all the losses.
And the injuries as well. And we've spoken about
Yeah.
that before. I mean, look, uh, these are the players that have not been rostered, just in case if you're not aware. There's Dax Kilby, Bryce Cunningham, Wyatt Parliament, Bryce Warrecker, Sabia Marte, Jackson Lovich, Richie Bonamalo, Thomas Frick, Brock Selvage, Houston Merrill, who was absolutely phenomenal last season, Brian Henry, Angel Benitez, Matt Estrada, Ryan Osinski, and Luis Velasquez.
It's a
There's a
lot of
lot of
talent right
legitimate
there.
names there. Yeah, no question.
Yeah. Well, if you guys don't have anything else on that note, I think I'm gonna wrap up. You guys, anything you want to speak
Um,
on?
I'm sad that Friday I have tickets to go to a play on Broadway. I'm seeing I don't know if you guys watch The Pit, but I'm seeing the guy who plays Dr. Langdon in it. I
Mm.
did wish I had thought about the fact that that was minor league opening day, but
The Pit is awesome, by the way. If you haven't watched it, it's awesome.
yeah,
The Pit.
great show. But yeah, so I am sad I am missing opening day, but I promise as soon as I get out, I will go back and watch some of the games and see some of the stuff from Pico Cone and
Hmm.
Ben Hess and whoever starts for Tampa. I'm so excited. I'm happy baseball's back. I'm happy the Yankees are back and off to a really nice start. But this is like, you know, that was like opening up like that present before Christmas. This is Christmas morning Friday is when
Hmm.
I have the Yankees and all the minor league teams back.
Yes, agreed.
It just needed to stop raining and being so freaking cold up here, and then I can get in the car and go watch a game.
Go see my boy.
I,
I
I'm trying to, I might get in the car and see if I can do that here.
oh my God. Well,
But
on that note, guys, you guys have a good night. Thank you guys for tuning in. On the way out, please make sure you hit the like, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. Good night, guys.